Parking revenge. A woman refuses to be helpful and ends up in jail. Terrible parkers are usually super entitled. Most entitled people can't help but show their true colors in a parking lot or on the side of the street when parking. Lines mean nothing to the monsieur. It doesn't matter if their tires are 4 inches from the curb or 4 feet. It's their world and they are going to park wherever the heck they want to park. Sorry, but you're in the way. So, on the rare occasions that jerks like this get served proper justice, it truly warms the heart. It was an occasion such as this less than a href equals https www.reddit.com//7u8xs/can't_you_underscore just_around_me/greater than that we heard about less than a greater than from our hero. A construction foreman just trying to do his job. His nemesis for the day was a snobby mother who didn't think the rules applied to her. She learned the hard way that they do. The job. Our hero, the foreman, didn't give his name, but foreman is good enough. So let's go with that. Foreman was working as a foreman on a house build. It wasn't exactly the easiest job, either. As he explained, the location is kinda strange. The house is 250 feet up a hill via a footpath only. All of our materials have to come up this footpath by hand. It's a pain in the butt to manually carry, quite literally, an entire house up this hill. Even before the actual construction began each day, the workers would have a heck of a time just getting the supplies and materials to the site. Fortunately, the site had 2 dedicated parking spots at the bottom of the hill, so the unloading and hauling were made as easy as it could be. Unfortunately, the site was also very near an elementary school, and it was because of this that the trouble began. One morning, the snob. Because of the spot's proximity to the school, it was very common for parents of students to park in them, which can create big problems for the construction crew. Foreman knew how to handle it. Though, I consider myself a reasonable person. So if someone is parked in the spots and we don't have a delivery or a need to park a truck, I will let it go. If we need the spots and there's someone parked there, however, I will ask them to move nicely, and most of the time they do so immediately. Most of the time was the key phrasing here, as Foreman was soon to find out. Though other parents had given him a hard time about the parking spots in the past, one young mother blew them out of the water. The day in question began as most other days did. Foreman walked the site and directed his workers where they'd do the most good. In fact, the day was practically boring, until one phone call set off a fateful encounter. I get a phone call from the lumber delivery truck that is en route to our location. He says he'll be there in about 2 or 3 minutes. This was the lumber for the frame of the house. It was obviously critically important that the crew receives the lumber in a timely manner. It would take at least an hour to unload all that lumber, so it wasn't like they could just block off the street for the duration. But that was why they had the 2 parking spots in the first place. Foreman walked down to the street to make sure the spots were clear. But they were not. A young woman was sitting in her idling car, somehow taking up both spots, thinking that she was just an average parent picking up her kid after a long day. Foreman explained the situation and asked the woman, politely, to move her car. Her response was not so polite. "I'll just be a few minutes. And your truck isn't here. Take a chill pill, dude. Take a chill pill, dude. Who did this woman think she is?" Foreman started to respond, but before he could, the truck carrying the lumber arrived. While he turned to deal with the approaching truck, the woman rolled her window back up. After speaking with the driver and explaining what he was dealing with, Foreman turned his attention back to the woman. Foreman smiled, waved at the woman in the car and reminded her through the window that she was parked illegally. She still didn't care, and, after rolling down her window with considerable attitude, spat out, "Can't you guys just unload around me? Jesus. It's not that hard." By this point, Foreman wasn't even worried about her. He simply smiled as a light bulb went off in his head. He'd make her regret ever parking in this spot. The revenge. Foreman went back to the truck driver and let him in on his plan. "I instructed the delivery driver to park as close to her as possible and block her in with the porta potty that was at one end of our reserved spots and the parked car that is parked just adjacent to our spots on the other end." He smiled because he immediately got what I'm trying to do, and proceeded to expertly block this lady and her car into a little two-parking spot jail. Foreman wasn't done, either. His next move was to call the parking police. "I wasn't trying to get her in trouble. I just wanted a record of why we were blocking part of the street so we don't get in trouble with the city," he explained. Meanwhile, the workers started unloading the lumber. A few minutes later, the snobby woman's child arrived and hopped in the car. Incredibly, only then did the woman realize her predicament. Not only was her car boxed in, but because the lumber truck was so close to the driver's side, she was trapped in the car. What could she do? Well, since she was so far up her own butt, her next move would be equally as stupid as everything else she'd already done this day. The meltdown. Now the snobby woman really started to lose it. She climbed over the passenger seat and fell out of the door. As she turned to Foreman, she screamed, "I'm in a big hurry. You need to move your darn truck right now so I can go." Quote, the driver of the truck smiled politely and told her, "Ma'am, in order to unload the lumber on the truck we had to unstrap it and, per our company policy, I'm not allowed to move the truck with an unsecured load on it." Sorry. This sent the woman into a complete rage. "Forget your policy. I have somewhere to be." Quote, at this point, Foreman finally lost his ability to hold his laughter any longer and broke down in hysterics, laughing at her stupid rage. Foreman thought this was the perfect time to give the woman a taste of her own medicine. So he threw her own words back in her face. "Can't you just pull out around it? Less than strong greater than it's not that hard less than strong greater than. F you," she screamed, and stormed back to her car, climbing over the passenger seat, back into the driver's seat. This was the moment that the traffic cop pulled up in her patrol car. Though the woman hadn't noticed yet, just as was awkwardly and angrily climbing back in her car, the cop walked up to Foreman. But before she could even say hello, the snobby woman drew everyone's attention to her car. The crash. This is when the road rage took over. Foreman explained, quote, the woman slammed her car into reverse and stomped on the gas, crashing into our porta potty and knocking it over. Then she threw the car into drive and tried to mount the curb and drive on the sidewalk. Oh, to have been there and seen that. Foreman, the truck driver, and the police officer just stood there, totally dumbfounded. They couldn't believe the woman's solution to the problem, which she'd caused, was outright destruction. The woman, whose car was now stuck on the curb, was swaying up a storm from the driver's seat. I could hear her screaming obscenities over the idling truck from inside her car, Foreman recalled. The officer calmly walked over to the immobilized vehicle and did something that made the woman jump about 10 feet in the air. The arrest. Still steaming, the entitled woman was shocked when the police officer appeared suddenly in her window. She got out of the car, which the officer had requested, and the officer promptly pulled out her handcuffs and slapped them around the woman's wrists. Foreman was beside himself. My favorite part of the entire thing is watching her face go to shock as she realized she just did all of that in front of a police officer. The nasty woman's bad day just escalated to one of her worst days as the police officer sat her down next to her mobile car. Of course, that didn't stop her from ranting and raving. She started by trying to lie to the officer about how we told her she could stay there and that we never asked her to move, according to Foreman. But the officer wasn't buying it. Foreman continued. The traffic officer responded that she was the one who was originally called when the woman first refused to move and that she already knows what's going on. While statements were given to the police, the rest of the lumber is unloaded and the truck driver cleared out. Overall, they had a much better day than the irate soccer mum who seriously chose the wrong place to park. That day, she was about to be hit with some charges that would rock her world. The aftermath. In the end, the horrible woman had a really bad day, Foreman explained. By the end of the ordeal, she was arrested, charged with child endangerment. Her kid was in the back of the car the whole time. Reckless driving, destruction of property, the porta potty, and driving on a suspended license. On top of all that, she also got her car towed. The kid went home with his grandma and she went to spend some quality time in a cell. Yep, she crashed her car, lost her license, her freedom, and her kids all in one crazy moment. All because she figured she was too important to move her car to allow for some hardworking construction guys do their job. As Foreman put it, she'll probably think twice about parking in a tow-away zone if she ever gets a license again.